Thank you for joining us around the fire. Now, want to hear a scary story?
I have returned to this house, though I swore I never would. The road here winds like a serpent through the hills, with hideous barren fields mocking me from either side. By the time my childhood home came into view against the swollen gray sky, I was so weary that I nearly turned back. But I have nowhere else to go. The house is unchanged, and worse for it. The same sagging roof, the same dead trees clawing at the windows. Inside, everything smells of dust and dinge, and there's that permanent staleness that implies that nothing is ever touched, nothing ever moves. My parents never move either. Mother sits in her chair by the window, quietly watching the yard all day. Father stays in his study. Neither of them had much to say when I arrived. They didn't even acknowledge my presence until I asked if they'd eaten today. "Tea," Mother said finally, her voice thin and papery. So I made her tea. She didn't drink it. I saw her this evening. The sky was bruising, nearing dusk, when finally I ventured to the back porch. I had been pacing inside all afternoon, restless from the oppressive quiet, and I thought the open air might soothe me well. At first, I didn't notice her. My eyes were on the dying light, and the slender sinking shadows it cast across the fields. Then I saw her. She was standing at the very edge of the property, where the tall grass meets the tree line. At least, I think it was a she. The figure was cloaked in black, still as stone, the outline of her body just barely visible against the fading trees. I couldn't see her face. The screen door was half open behind me. I was frozen, and she didn't move either. She simply stood there. I remembered Mother's old friend Marjorie, this old woman who lives a mile or so down the road. She had always covered herself with the most ornate scarves and costume jewelry, like some vagabond woman. The word we used to call her when I was a child is one of those we're not supposed to say anymore. But Marjorie was a mixture of mystery and camp, consistently dramatic, who always seemed to be coming or going from her latest adventures. For a while, I hadn't considered that she'd have a house at all. She'd always just appeared there, walking down the road to say hello to Mother and talk about this or that, and I hadn't thought about her in years. Still, I can't imagine who else it could be. There is no one else out here so far into the country. I offered a small wave, but she didn't wave back. She didn't do anything at all, which gave me quite a strange feeling. I turned and stepped inside, locking the door behind me. When I dared to peek out the window a few minutes later, she was gone. Mother sits by the window again today. Her tea is still untouched, the porcelain cup cold beneath my fingers when I finally moved it. I saw Marjorie yesterday, I said, breaking the silence. She asked without turning her head. The neighbor Marjorie. Does she still come around to see you? She was standing in the yard. Mother shook her head no. Are you sure? I asked. I needed her to tell me I was right. But instead, she said, I see her sometimes. Such a confirmation eased my mind. Otherwise, I may have been too afraid to enjoy the porch this evening after putting Mother and Father to bed. I lingered in their room for a moment, as I often did when I was a child. I kissed Mother's cheek, and she didn't stir. Then I leaned over to Father's bedside. He was propped up against the headboard, his mouth open in a silent sigh. I reached out to adjust his pillow. But would he even notice if I did? I stared at him for a long moment, trying to reconcile what I was seeing. There is no way around it. The father that raised me is long gone. Time is such a cruel thief. I saw her again tonight. Marjorie was standing there, far beyond the reach of the porch light, at the edge of the yard where the grass turns wild. Tonight, I thought she might step forward. She tilted her head just slightly, I think, when I first noticed her. But she never moved beyond her post at the crooked fence. Perhaps she wanted to visit Mother, but lost her nerve. I understand that. There is something about the house, about Mother, that would cause anyone to hesitate. Still, it felt rude not to acknowledge her. So I lifted my hand and called her name softly, while I stepped from the stairs to the grass. Yet, she did not wave back. The closer I got, the stranger she seemed. Her whole figure was draped in black, as if in mourning, and I realized now why I could not see her face. It was covered by a long black veil. She did not move. She only watched me, though I saw no eyes. I thought to go closer. I did. But then a wind rose from the fields, bending the high grass and rattling the windows, tugging at the veil. I feel a bit silly to be frightened by the old woman who lives down the road, but there was something in the way she stood, so still, so quiet. Tonight, I am afraid to sleep. Marjorie's dead. I laughed, for the suggestion was ridiculous. But Mother finally turned to look at me, with eyes that were glassy and pale. She died last year, or the one before. The cancer got her. She said it so plainly, and then she turned back to the window. But only yesterday, you said that you see her sometimes, I insisted. Mother did not look back. I saw her once again tonight. I couldn't bring myself to step outside this time, not even to the porch. I stayed by the window as the sun melted into the horizon. She appeared in the yard as the last light faded. She's no longer at the edge of the property now, but halfway between the tree line and the house. Still cloaked in black, still unmoving. She is not Marjorie. I know that now. I wanted to call out to her, to demand to know who she is and why she keeps coming here. But my throat closed around the words. When I moved to another window, in hopes of viewing her from a different angle, the floor creaked beneath my weight, and her head tilted again, like an animal, as though she'd heard me. I stumbled back from the glass, too afraid to keep looking. It's morning now, and I haven't gone to the window. I can't. Early this afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I don't know why it startled me so badly. I've been alone here for days, other than my parents, and my parents never stir. On the stoop, I found a bouquet of flowers, roses, lilies, and baby's breath, bound in paper. There was no card, no note. I brought them inside, if only because it felt wrong to leave something so beautiful out there in the cold. For a while, I busied myself with arranging them, filling every vase I could find. The house felt alive for the first time since I arrived as their fragrance filled the air, and I let myself feel happy for the briefest moment. But when I returned to the room, the flowers were dead. Every petal was black and curled, every stem brittle and broken. The vases were bloated with murky water that smelled of rot. I dared not believe my eyes. How could I? But when I reached for one of the flowers, it crumbled to ash in my hand. There was tapping last night. At first, I thought it was a branch against the window, but the sound came again. A rhythmic tapping, like long nails against glass. I didn't look. I couldn't bring myself to. Instead, I pulled the covers tight around me as the tapping moved from window to window, circling the house. I don't know when it stopped, but when I woke, the house was quiet. I asked Mother if she noticed, but she shrugged it off. She sat in her chair as always, her face turned toward the window. Tonight, I'll try not to listen. The door to Father's study has been locked more often than not since I arrived. I asked him about it once, but he only shook his head. Yesterday, it was open. I found my paints in the far corner, stacked where I left them years ago. They smelled faintly of turpentine and dust, but they were mine. I felt an urge to create, so much like how I used to, and for the first time since moving back, I had something to do with my hands besides wring them. I spent hours there letting the brush pull me away from this house, this room, this silence. When I left for dinner, I made sure the door was closed. But this morning, the paintings were ruined. Outside, Scattered across the porch, covered in frost and dew, I found my canvases and paints and brushes. But the tools were ruined, and the colors bled together in terrible streaks of mud. "Why would you throw them out like that?" I demanded of Father. "Why did you do it?" The pathetic old man just sat in his chair, staring at the wall. He does not need to say it for me to know. The study is his room, and not mine, and I am still a guest in this house. I wanted to retrieve the paints. So badly I did. But the thought of stepping outside, even for a moment, makes my chest tighten. I think I'll leave them there. Let the wind take them. I don't know why I should write in this journal. I don't want to. I don't feel able. And I know Mother and Father would think it absurd. But it is a relief to say what I feel and think in some way, though the effort is getting to be greater than the relief. Half the time now I am awfully lazy and lie down ever so much, as if I'd caught the disease of old age, maturing several decades in a matter of days. I saw her hand. It was just past midnight, and the tapping had started again. I told myself I wouldn't look, but my curiosity betrayed me. I crept toward the hallway window, the floorboards sighing beneath me, and when I looked out, there she was, on the porch now. I backed away, my heart pounding so loudly I thought she might hear it. By the time I reached my bed, the tapping had stopped. When I went to check on Mother this morning, she was trembling and sickly, her lips chapped and gray. I asked if she heard the tapping in the night, or if she had laid eyes upon the woman in the yard, but she shook her head no. "Not a woman," she whispered, without meeting my eyes. "It's the child." "What child?" I asked. She shook her head, pulling at the dry skin around her yellow nails. "I hear him at night, laughing, crying, running through the house." I wanted to tell her she was imagining things, but the truth was, I had heard the boy too. Until she said it, I had thought it was a dream, but indeed, in the dead of night, I had awoken to stomping feet and echoing giggles, like some late-night game of hide-and-seek. It is getting to be a great effort for me to think straight. Just nerves, I suppose. This afternoon, for a moment, I saw myself walking into a nursery to care for some infant. But whose child it was, I couldn't say. It wasn't my room from when I was a child, not that I can recall, and when I placed the baby in its crib, it looked up at me with wide eyes, but they weren't fresh ones anymore, but old and tired, and I realized I was gazing upon my father, wrinkled and weathered. For the life of me, I cannot imagine a nursery in this house. Why, I wouldn't have a child of mine live in such a horrid place for the world. I never thought of it before, but it is lucky that they called me back here after all. I can stand it so much easier than what I had done before, taking awful work outside the house just to pay the bills. After bidding Mother and Father good night, I glanced out the window just as I reached the hallway. The woman was standing in the yard again, but now there were two other figures with her. Dark shadows on either side. I hurried to my bed, where I sit now beneath the blankets, waiting for the morning. I thought I heard my parents in the kitchen when I woke, their voices low and warm, but as I approached, I saw a strange figure near the stove. It wasn't the woman from the yard. This one was younger, dressed in more typical fashions, with her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and anxious eyes. I opened my mouth to demand who she was when a child ran past, practically knocking me off my feet, and I cried out in terror, stumbling against the wall. Then the woman screamed too, grasping for the child, and as he raised his voice, the whole house rang with our cries. He hid behind the woman, clutching at her dress for cover, sobbing over and over that he hates this house, that he wishes they never came here, and that the house is haunted. The woman, breathless, swore to him that it was not. But she was lying. When at last she wiped his tears and sent him away, she lingered, fingers trembling as they curled around a small, blinking box. Then she pressed several buttons, lifted it to her ear, and whispered into it, "I'm scared. Will you come home early?" A pause, then a sharp intake of breath. Nicholas is right. There's something wrong with this place. I could not hear the voice on the other end, but I knew it must have protested. Her own voice grew more desperate. "It's not just the couple who died here," she cried. Then she said something stranger still. "A weird postcard showed up in the mail today." But that was impossible. The mail had not been delivered for as long as I could remember. The woman did not see me as she left, her own eyes now brimming with tears. I waited until the house was still again, before moving toward the paper she had left behind. It was addressed to me. The nerve of this stranger to open mail addressed to me. My hands shook as I opened the thin envelope, its corners yellowing, and removed the single sheet inside. "Our condolences for your loss." I don't know why I haven't thought of it before. The accident. Or maybe I have, but I've buried it so deeply that even now, it feels like I'm watching someone else's life. It's coming back to me now, in pieces. The sounds of tires screaming on wet pavement, the glint of headlights, brighter than the sun. His voice yelling my name, and then nothing. "Our condolences for your loss." But that can't be right. I'm still here. I've been here all along. Haven't I? The woman in black is in the doorway. She did not knock. She did not speak. She is simply there, her veil drifting like smoke in the faint light. My legs refuse to move, though every instinct in me screams to run. But where would I go? There is no place left. "What do you want?" I whisper. My voice cracks, brittle as dry leaves. She steps inside slowly, as if gliding through water. Then she kneels in front of me, and at last the veil shifts, and I finally catch a glimpse of her visage beneath it. There is not a monster at all. There is beauty. There is my face staring back at me, serene and still. We sit together now, as one, quiet and steady as the house around us. I feel her fingers over mine, cool and gentle, as she writes with my hand, guiding my pen across this very page. The words come easily now, though they aren't mine. They belong to us. I was afraid, but I'm not anymore. Now I understand. I've been waiting for myself all along. She pulls me forward, toward the dark, toward...
Thank you for joining us around the fire. Now, want to hear a scary story?